I took the high def video and I slowed it down to 0.25 speed and looked at the airspace. And in that airspace, you see these kind of curious optical anomalies, these flashes of light coming from the airspace. And so the first question, of course, is, well, what is that? Is it an artifact of the image, or is it something that's really there? I've independently corroborated these optical flashes from other concert goer video. And it is the only location in the footage where you see such events. So we don't think this is optical anomaly. It correlates exactly with the airspace where the transponders went dark. So let's try to suss out what this is and what's going on here. The best way to do that would be to get the actual radar records from McCarran, and I FOIA'd the FAA to do so. So we'll quickly talk about the photography, or the notion that those might have been pictures, because to take a quick little side tunnel here, the research community wondered if they were perhaps people taking pictures. And if we think about that, there would be no reason to take pictures from helicopters between the hotel. And for all the reasons listed on this mega slide here. Firearm muzzle flash is a regular reddish, white, or yellow. Navigation lights are going to be red, green, or flashing white, like a strobe light. And so none of that is consistent with what we observed. It is most consistent with suppressed muzzle flash. Suppressed muzzle flash is actually much brighter than unsuppressed muzzle flash when viewed from the line of fire. This is what a transponder route should look like along the strip. You know, it comes up, tours the strip, comes back. This is what many of the paths look like. There's a break, then the shooting occurs, and then about 20, 30 minutes later, that same aircraft takes off again from McCarran and then does another side route. They were directed away by the controllers. So wanted to figure out what the heck was actually going on there. So I FOIA'd the FAA. Well, I asked for the records of those tail numbers, the flight logs, the raw radar records, meaning like the primary radar, not the secondary, where you have the transponder information. But I also wanted the raw radar record. And I got a very strange response back from FAA, and that was to say that they had no records of the listed tail numbers. They had no records of the aircraft. And for me to keep in mind that they only track things that are under instrument flight rules. So that didn't seem like an accurate response from FAA. I brought it to a local airport. I discussed it with some professionals over there, and they said, "Yeah, they're lying. They're holding something close to their chest." And the gentleman I was speaking to turned over his shoulder and he pointed to a helicopter on the tarmac, and he said, "You see that one there? Well, that helicopter has its transponder on right now. It has to. It's Class Bravo airspace. So they're definitely hiding something." I spent the Martin Luther King weekend of 2018 reviewing all of Title 14 FAA, and I wrote an appeal. And I explained to them all the ways in which they should have the records of those helicopters. Um, and one curious thing about this response that I got, it was given by a gentleman named Michael Artist. And what's curious about that is that he'd been with the FAA for a long time, so long, in fact, that he was actually involved in tracking Flight 93 in 2001, if you can believe that. So this gentleman should have known that the FAA had those records. And it was strange that he was the one that authored the response. We'll just leave that there. In the appeal to FAA, I cited all of the regulations, the CFR that requires them to have those records. I also went to atclive.net and got the audio transmissions of the controllers speaking to those helicopters. And so I was really able to prove on a number of levels that not only did they have the records, but they should have the records and they should produce the records. And the response that I got from them was to say that the information requested is part of an ongoing Federal Bureau of Investigation criminal law enforcement matter, and that the premature release could hinder their investigation. All right, well, I had lots of reasons at this point in my life to not trust the results of FBI investigations. I mean, one just need to look back to numerous assassination attempts or other things. or particularly 2001, where no investigation into controlled demolition was ever conducted in New York, despite hundreds of first responders reporting explosives. All of the work in the 9/11 Truth Movement, just the mountains of reasons that the mythology around that event should be different in the American public eye right now. So yeah, I had some trust issues, and as such, I shared some of that information with IntelliHub back in the day. They were able to post it up on their website, and I did redacted versions to protect, myself, my wife, my kids, my home, and even those involved at the FAA. We're clearly dealing with bad people, and so there was no reason to put everybody's situation in a bad spot, I felt. A curious thing happened a couple of days after IntelliHub posted the redacted version of those requests. Somebody reached out to them to state that a CIA SOD unit had effectively been the ones to conduct that operation. Now, whether this is true or not, I don't know. I'm just sharing with the audience that IntelliHub did receive this report within days of publishing the redacted FOIA requests. And as this user indicates, it appears that we might have fleshed out some more whistleblowers. So I wondered if we could see the helicopters in question that turned their transponders off with closed circuit television. So I asked the Nevada Department of Transportation to please um, release the footage that they take from their closed circuit TVs of the interstates. And wouldn't you know it, of all of the cameras in the Las Vegas area, there were only two that were offline that night for no good reason. And one of those two was the one that would have perfectly captured the airspace between the hotels. So there you go. We tried. I could get this camera, and this camera was northward facing, and I did look extensively through this image, but just could not discern whether I could, whether there was helicopters there or not. I made an effort, and of note, it's strange that the one that would have better captured that was offline that night. All right, let's talk about ballistics. So, were shots fired from the room, or were shots fired from somewhere else? Well, we've seen muzzle flash between the airspace. On the 32nd floor, we don't see windows broken. We don't see flash coming out of the hotel. In this clip, we have concert goers discussing the fact that after hearing the last two percussion sounds of the night, only then do they see glass falling from the Mandalay Bay.
We saw police right behind us with rifles, and they asked us to take cover. And so we ran.
There's glass falling from Mandalay Bay.
And so we ran over. This is basically probably not the. It's probably not the safest place to be, but I'm afraid of
sitting on the ground. Somebody's gonna have to bleach me after this.
So this was put together by Chris over at Truth Tracker. This is fantastic. This is a side-by-side comparison of the timestamps of the last two shots. And so we know exactly at what time these concert goers were hearing the glass falling from the hotel. And it's after the shooting was over.
First shot.
And so we ran.
There's glass falling from Mandalay Bay.
And so we ran.
No, the 32. 32? Yeah, 32.
Second shot, which according to the body camera footage occurred at 10:16 p.m. 10:16 p.m. is the last time Stephen Paddock was alive. After two single shots from a pistol. That's what we're told.
There were two percussive sounds coming from that room. There are two broken windows. My conjecture is that sounds were probably the windows being blown out after the shooting was over. So if we talk about the distance of these shots, we've got approximately 330 yards to the venue, 700 if you're back in the airspace, maybe even 900 depending on where shots are going. When we talk about the ballistics of a bullet, when the energy drops off substantially, so you lose kinetic energy the further out you are. Many of the people that were hit that night were hit with a high angle of approach. And there were a lot of injuries that didn't have extensive exit wounds. And so that's indicative of bullets losing their kinetic energy, i.e., probably being shot from too far away. So, in hunting, you want to close ground because you don't want to just injure the animal that you're trying to kill. And so in this case, it's just strange that so many people were hit and didn't die. And the few that did die, many of them happened to have been hit in the head. And I think that's just an artifact of, a large crowd, and, some bullets will hit heads of people covering or running or what have you, and others will hit the body. But many people survived their injuries. We should ask if the audio signatures that we heard, the audio of the volleys that night, even make sense, for a person allegedly in a room with all these weapons, and he can just swap out the guns as needed to shoot. Yet there are these really long breaks in the cadence of the firing. And so to me, that doesn't make sense on its face. But another big problem with the audio signatures is that you have what are called overlapping rates of fire. So meaning two weapons fired at the same time and with different rates. And the media and the various journals and whatnot out there tried to tell everybody, basically to gaslight us into thinking that that was from echoes. And so we need to be reminded that echoes don't change the rate of fire, only the pitch. So it was impossible that those overlapping rates were not two different shooters, or at least two different guns, or two different sources of the audio. I reached out to an attorney who had litigated a number of matters for people, on behalf of issues related to the U.S. government. And so this gentleman, my recollection is that he made the claim that they had not proved a single person was hit or injured by a single weapon recovered from the room. And I think, as you've seen, all the bump stock stuff has, they didn't gain any ground as far as regulating bump stocks. That may be because they never could prove that any of those bump stocks were actually used in the death of anybody. Mindy Robinson, and others have done a really nice job looking at audio and 911 calls. And so after we're told the shooter was dead, there were still 911 calls coming in of gunfire along the strip at 11:04, 11:06, 11:08. But I believe it was 10:15-ish that we're told the shooter killed himself. And so here we just have some interesting news coverage where the people that were there, the FBI asked for their phones and any evidence that they had. And when they returned the phones, the data was missing. So video was wiped, pictures were wiped, audio was wiped. And so there appeared to have been an effort to maybe, hide evidence. What could possibly be the motive for such a horror story? 2 weeks before the event, an individual on 4chan said that there was going to be a mass casualty incident in the Las Vegas Henderson area. He called it the High Incident Project. He fingered Michael Chertoff and Sheldon Adelson as the participants in this incident, and that the goal was going to be to roll out body scanner technology to, enhance their contracts and effectively make billions of dollars in the ensuing regulations and required installation of these machines in high rises and other places. The very next day, this man, the CEO of Chertoff Group, was in the news talking about how we needed body scanner tech in hotels.
Do you want to know how blatantly, transparently obvious this agenda is? The next day, former Homeland Security official Chad Sweet, who just so happens to also be the co-founder and CEO of the Chertoff Group, went on CNBC, and not only did he say that in a free society, there are no ways to eliminate security risks.
In a free society, there's no way to eliminate this kind of risk.
So what he really means is we need to be less free if we want to be safe. We need to give up our liberty for temporary security. He was also pushing, guess what?
But there are ways, as you said, to potentially mitigate the risk. In addition to intelligence sharing, You can also do a number of steps to